The live stream window was small, but the silence around it felt cathedral-sized. A pine wreath hung high behind the lectern. The camera kept trying to focus on the gloss of sap, failing, refocusing, failing again. My father's partners spoke in smooth, rounded words that didn't catch on anything. They said visionary a lot. They didn't say that he liked his coffee half an hour stale because it tasted honest, or that he kept a bag of river stones on his desk to remind himself money should feel heavy. I'm Riley Tams, 32. Forensic accountant, the kind of person people call when numbers start lying. I was watching my father's memorial from my San Francisco apartment because the service was at the ranch in Montana, and the last time I'd stood on that land, I'd left with my throat numb from unsaid things. The audio cracked. A whisper of static fluttered across the speakers like a moth. Then my name. And a private package for Ms. Riley Tams, the attorney said, and the camera juddered right as he held up something small and wrapped in brown paper. I didn't breathe again until my intercom buzzed an hour later, and the delivery guy handed me a box that smelled faintly of cold barn wood. Inside, beneath a single sprig of dried sage, lay a folded quilt from my childhood dark denim triangles and dull gold stitches that used to look like stars when I slept under them. In winters that smelled of pine and old iron. Tucked into the binding, a note in my father's blocky print. Finish what I started. The pine sap memory pressed against my sternum. I spread the quilt on the floor. The stitches weren't stars, they were letters. Not letters words, not words fragments. In the kitchen, I turned off the lights and passed a UV pen light across the denim. My hands shook. Lines flared into view. Amber, gravity, harbor, orange. BIP 39 seed words. My father had stitched a seed phrase into a blanket I'd cried under when I was 8. I felt that old ache widen into something colder. If this was one share of the key, who had the rest? The knot of static in the soundbar whispered again as if it had answers. I heard myself laugh, one dry bark that sounded like someone else. Then I picked up my phone and called the only person whose number I'd memorized backward and forward the summer everything went wrong. Micah, I said when a voice answered. It's me. A quiet beat. Then my brother said, they finally called you home? He sounded different. Gravel packed into velvet. He'd been out 10 months. We'd said 7 words to each other since. I could smell his cigarette through the line like a memory. I think Dad left us a test, I said, and 600 million reasons to fail it. He exhaled, smoke in my ear, winter in my bones. Then you better come up, he said, before someone else takes a test for you. The next morning, I flew into Bozeman, under a sky the color of galvanized steel. The rental car heater smelled like pennies and old dust. The road smelled like pine and cold iron. At the ranch gate, someone had tied a strip of black cloth around the post. It snapped in the wind like a warning. Serena met me on the porch. She had been my father's wife for 13 years. She had been an ice sculpture, the first 2 in a human being since. Her wool coat was the kind that makes rich women look like honest hills. Thank you for coming, she said, and I realized she meant it. Did he leave you anything? I asked. She smiled with her mouth, not her eyes. A house full of ghosts, and a ledger full of enemies. We moved through the kitchen, where pots still smelled like onions and wake food. On the oak table lay 3 things. A worn leather notebook that smelled like tobacco and vanilla, a chipped mug we used to fight over, and an envelope addressed to the ones who will fight for what's left. I opened the envelope. 3 lines in my father's hand, vault migrated to multisig. Signers R, M, S, V. Finish what I started? V? I asked. Serena set a saucer down softly. Victor Hale, she said. His friend, from the last 5 years, venture partner, clean suits, soft threats. Your co-signer? I asked. She looked out the window at the winter yellow grass. Apparently. Micah arrived half an hour later with a pit bull in the passenger seat and graphite smudged across his thumb and forefinger like he'd been counting ghosts. He hugged me, one-armed awkward, and warm, and held on half a beat longer than pride wanted. You look like a person, I said. You look like you smell trouble coming, he said. That's always been your gift. We unrolled the quilt on the table. Micah touched the stitches like he was reading Braille. "He used to stick me with this needle when I ran past," he murmured, and a smile cracked through. "Said pain teaches you to look." Serena poured coffee that smelled like forgiveness and sat. "Your father called me the night before the crash," she said, eyes on the steam. "Said if anything happened, I should keep Victor out. I said I wasn't sure I could. He said you could." "Me," I said. "The daughter who moved 2,000 miles away and learned to count for a living." "He also said you never stop counting when it matters," she said. "He kept a ledger of the men he hurt to get here. He was going to repay them, quietly. The vault isn't just a dragon hoard." I ran my thumb over the blue ink of his note. "Finish what I started." The coffee turned metallic in my mouth. "Where's your shard?" I asked her. Serena took off her wedding ring, simple platinum, old-fashioned, and slid it across the table. Inside the band, engraved so fine it looked like a whisper, were 4 words: forest, vapor, silver, tiger. Mine was in the envelope with the quilt, I said, and read my 4. Micah looked at the leather notebook, flipped it open, and my throat tightened. Inside were rows of numbers, hash fragments, call signs scribbled in pencil, and between them, my father's notes in tiny, stubborn script. Graphite smudged my brother's fingers, black as he turned the pages. "Where's yours?" I asked quietly. He pulled a folded photograph from his jacket. It was of us, 8 and 10, standing in front of the old shortwave in Dad's office. On the back, in graphite, radio warm breath coax light. "The attic," Micah said, and his voice went small and young. "Where we'd hide when Mom and Dad would fight. We climbed the narrow stairs that smelled like dry wood in the past. The study hadn't changed, dust in the light, a tube radio on the desk like a sleeping animal. Boxes of QSL cards from all over the world stacked neatly, edges softened by time. I pressed a palm onto the radio's metal casing. It was cold, as a coin cold, as the word iron. Micah found the cigar box under the window seat. Inside, more QSL cards. A Polaroid of the 3 of us with our tongues blue from popsicles. A strip of brittle tape. When he breathed on the Polaroid, the white edge fogged, and 2 faint words appeared in the moisture like a magic trick. Cabin. Ember. "Thermoreactive ink," I said. "He taught you that?" "I taught me that," he said, and I heard the brick of prison walls in the flatness. I looked at the radio, at the coax cable, at the way dust glowed when you moved your breath across it. I listened. Beneath the quiet, the tiniest hum, a whisper of static. I crouched, pulled the radio forward with both hands, and my fingers found the latch my father had carved into the case years ago when he wanted to keep us out. I pressed, it clicked, and a hidden compartment popped open with a sigh like warm air releasing a secret. Inside lay a hardware wallet, matte black, a flash drive shape with weight. I touched it and felt my father's calloused hand in the memory of it. Serena had stayed back downstairs, letting the attic hold us. When we returned, she was at the sink washing a single plate with concentration. "Victor called," she said without turning. "He'll be here at 4 with a notary." "Let him come," I said. "We'll be gone." "Where?" she asked. "County clerk," I said. "I want to see who has been filing what." In town, the courthouse smelled like damp paper and old promises. The clerk, a woman with a silver cross and a face that could cut a man for fun, raised an eyebrow when she saw whose file I requested. "Everyone in this valley thinks they have a right to this file today," she said, then slid it across with a look that meant, "Be quick." We read in silence. 2 days before the crash, my father had filed to migrate assets to a multi-signature vault. 4 signers listed by initials only, RMSB. A schedule stapled to the back to add non-cash distributions to some list I didn't recognize. I took a photo on my phone and slid the file back. Outside, the air cut my lip when I licked it. We stood in breath clouds that looked like something leaving us. Micah said, "We need to try the wallet." "We'll need the full phrase," I said. "We have 12 words between us." "Plus this," he said, lifting his palm. He'd laid it on the notebook, and now it wore graphite smears, like a fundraiser for ghosts. Smudge blends hid faint indentations on the page beneath the imprint of words, written hard enough to bruise paper. He shaded over them gently until letters rose. Birch, oyster, risk, canvas. Serena looked up at the ranch house like it was breathing. He always said secrets kept inside a house only get heavier. We found the rest the way you find anything worth keeping. Slower than you want to. Faster than you fear. One word etched tiny inside the spine of his favorite book. One taped under the old dinner table. One stitched into the hem of the apron he wore when he made pancakes on snow days. We had 20. Victor arrived at 4 as promised. He wore a winter suit the color of expensive apologies. He didn't hug Serena. He photographed her with his eyes, as if she were an asset needing valuation. A notary hovered behind him, mouth pinched. "We all want what's best," Victor said, as if the words tasted clean in his mouth. "Then you won't mind if we punt," I said, and smiled like this was badminton. "Punt?" he said. "Delay," I said, "until we're sure we're all rowing to the same beach." He glanced at the leather notebook. "What are you holding, son?" he asked Micah. Micah smiled with no teeth. "Reminders." Victor's voice softened in a way men's voices do when they want you to relax your jaw. "Riley," he said, turning toward me. "Your father trusted me. He knew I could shepherd this." "Into what?" I asked. "A fund," he said. "New vehicles, new opportunities." "Like the one that burned down the people of Kestrel Biotech?" I asked. "Or the one that left families holding worthless tokens while you cashed out?" He blinked in that slow, offended way of men who can't remember the last time they were told no. "Your father trusted me," he repeated. "That's the problem I'm here to solve," I said. He left a card with a gold V and his number like a dare. The notary handed Serena a letter. Victor's motion for emergency control citing imminent dissipation by inexperienced heirs. When the dust from his tires settled, I felt like the air had lost 10 pounds. "Court," Serena said. "Tomorrow?" I said. "We have tonight." We tried the hardware wallet by the fire. The dog, whose name was Noodle, flopped with a sigh at my feet. The hardware smelled like cold plastic and a little like ozone. I entered the 20 words we had, thumbs shaking, breath clamped. The device chirped, a sound so small it felt designed to not scare a rabbit, and the screen bloomed with an address and a balance. $12.17. I laughed then, the odd ragged kind that doesn't end. Micah leaned back and ran both hands through his hair like he wanted to pull the day off. Serena set her mug down like it might break. Decoy wallet. My father had hidden a lock inside a lock. "We're missing 4 words, I said. Quiet suddenly. Or we're using the wrong order. Micah was staring not at the device, but at the radio. "Static," he said. "What?" I asked. He pointed. "He used to fall asleep in that chair, listening to the band voices skipping across night," he said. "Call signs. Names that sounded like spearheads. He kept cards. He kept everything." We went back to the study. The air in there tasted like dry paper and nicotine ghosts. We spread the QSL cards across the floor. Little rectangles with call letters, dates, tiny notes. "Thank you for the QSO. Great signal tonight," the moon was a whisper. My father had drawn a dot with a pencil at the corner of some, a dash on others. On the ones with dots, the call signs shared a pattern. The letters could be rearranged into BIP words: birch, oyster, risk, canvas, and 4 that we didn't have: window, frost, anchor, saddle. We warmed the backs of cards with our breath, held them over the lamp. On 4, words appeared in faint blooming letters as the paper heated: window, frost, anchor, saddle. Micah grinned like a boy caught stealing apples and not yet punished. "If he'd had a better childhood, this would have been a wholesome scavenger hunt," he said. We entered the 4 into the hardware wallet. It chirped again, and this time the screen went from small numbers to big ones, and then to lists. Wallets nested under wallets. Funds outbound, paused in drafts. A foundation created in Delaware with our last name on it, and a mission statement to recompense those harmed by malfeasance connected to Tam's capital between 2011 and 2019. My father had been a better man at night than he was in the group photos. The vault total sat at a number that made my throat go tight. $613 million and change. Separate balances marked tranche A restitution, tranche B endowment, family allocation. I scrolled and found a file tree labeled keys. Inside, scanned PDFs agreements, side letters, promissory notes that looked like mirror apologies, and then a series of draft transfers scheduled for the next 30 days to names I recognized from news articles I'd read when I moved away and decided not to look back. He'd been trying to finish what he started. Next we go to court, I said. The words felt like stepping into cold water. And we say what we found. County court the next morning smelled like toner and pine cleaner. The judge wore an expression that said she had no time for stories without receipts. Victor's attorney opened with a performance about imminent risk. He described me as estranged, Micah as recently incarcerated, Serena as conflicted, and Victor as steady. When it was my turn, I walked to the witness box and put my palm on the worn Bible and swore to tell the truth, even though there were nicer Bibles at home. My voice stayed even as I described the quilt, the ring, the radio, the cards. I said bib 39 and multi-sig and watched half the room tilt their heads. I said restitution and watched the judge's eyes flick down to her notes like she was recalculating. Counsel, the judge said to Victor's attorney, why? If this is indeed multi-sig, are you asking for unilateral control? He said words that sounded like logic until you touched them. We ask instead for a temporary restraining order preventing dissipation until signers agree, she said finally. 72 hours. Miss Thames, if you are telling me the truth, you will use that time to show me a clean plan that honors the decedent's intent. We walked into the cold and exhaled like chimneys. Serena laughed once, a sound like ice cracking the first time the sun hits it. I always wanted a judge to tell Victor to sit, she said. We didn't sleep. We drafted a charter for a foundation, wrote criteria for restitution, built a list of past harm. Micah called a man named Tom who ran a treatment program he'd been in twice and left 3 times. He asked if Tom wanted to help design a fund for people who get chewed up by men with too much money and too little sleep. Tom cried on the phone and said yes. At dawn, the hardware wallet chimed with a tiny notification. New device detected on cosigner V. We looked at each other. Victor had plugged in. Time, I said. We moved money like surgeons. We signed transfers to escrow accounts that couldn't be touched without 2 of 3 keys. We documented every step like my life depended on it because something did. At noon, Victor filed a new motion with a photo of Micah as evidence of criminal risk. At 1, Tom's affidavit hit the docket and painted a different picture. Micah Thames saved my life. At 3, Serena walked into the living room with a box from the attic labeled Dad's Regrets. Inside were letters, receipts, a photograph of my father on the day he signed the Kestrel deal with a smile that didn't include his eyes. She set it down like a man learning to lower a burden he'd carried for too long. At 4, the dog barked once and then hid under the table. In that way dogs do when the weather turns mean. A truck crunched the gravel. Victor stepped out with a deputy marshal and a smile. Afternoon, he said. We're here to enforce. The deputy looked at Serena's face and then at Victor's. He shifted his weight, and the house seemed to hold its breath. You can enforce the order, Serena said evenly, which says no dissipation. We aren't dissipating. We are complying. Victor moved past him toward the study. The deputy cleared his throat. Sir, he said. Victor stopped. He turned that smile on me again. Do you really think a quilt and a child's radio will hold up? He asked. I picked up the hardware wallet. It felt heavier than it should. I think truth does, I said, and paper. He left with a glare that promised future weather. 2 days later, we stood before the judge again with a binder that smelled like toner and coffee. I tabbed it the way I tab everything, too much. The judge smiled at me like she recognized the type. She read the charter, the restitution schedule, the foundation bylaws, the escrow agreements. She asked 2 questions I didn't expect. What percentage to treatment programs? And who decides when harm is enough? I answered with numbers and the word committee. She ruled that the estate would follow the plan. She declined Victor's motion. She appointed a special master to observe, and then she said something my ribs will remember longer than my brain. "Mr. Hale," she said, "this court is not a cash-out window for opportunists in tailored coats." The air tasted like pine and warmed iron. Micah squeezed my hand once and then pretended he hadn't. Serena took a breath so deep it sounded like a winter tree waking up. We spent the next month doing work that doesn't make headlines. Calls, meetings, lists. We returned funds to people who answered in shock and to people who called us names and then cried. We wired money to programs that count success in warm beds and unburned bridges. We endowed a foundation that will boldly have my father's last name on it because penance should be easy to Google. Victor was indicted 6 weeks later for doctor term sheets in an unrelated case. When I read the news, I felt nothing noble, just clean. He pled something that let him keep his suits and lose his taste for our air. On the last day of winter, I walked the ranch alone until the smell of pine finally lost the shadow of funeral cologne. The sun sat low and made everything look like a photograph of itself. I stood by the radio room window and watched Micah teach the dog to stay using a voice that could wake ghosts gently. "I'm signing off," I said to the empty room, and turned the dial on the radio. The whisper of static rose and fell like water. I thought of how my father would sit here at 2 a.m., eyes closed, listening to men call the dark by name and wait for someone to answer back from far away. I put my lips near the mesh and spoke in a voice I didn't recognize as mine. "If you can hear me," I said, "we finished what you started. We did it right." The static didn't answer. It didn't have to. Back in San Francisco, I keep the quilt folded over the back of my couch. Sometimes when the city smells like hot breaks and ocean, I run the UV pen over the stitches and let the words glow and disappear like a heartbeat. When people ask what the money was for, I tell them the truth. It was for making things heavy again, so we couldn't forget to carry them. And when they ask how we kept it safe, I say a sentence that makes them laugh until they realize I mean it. "With pine," I say, "and cold iron, and graphite on our fingers, and a hardware wallet that chirps like it's shy, and a leather notebook that smells like tobacco and vanilla, and a ring with 4 words inside it that mean more than they look." I don't tell them about the night in court when I realized the sound in my chest wasn't fear anymore. It was the whisper of static turning into a voice, and that the voice was mine.